Welcome, Chris, to the Happier at Work podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself to listeners?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I'll do this really quickly because the more interesting bit is talking about what people will find interesting. But yeah, I'm Chris. I founded Innofit about 4 years ago now. And prior to that, I'd actually worked in an investment bank, strategy consulting for a couple of years, and then sports marketing. So the basic belief number one of Innofit is that if you feel well, you work well. I realized that I didn't feel well when strategy consulting. I was working way too long hours, etc. And I didn't always work very well. But then contrast that with the past 6 years, I suppose, Innofit plus sports marketing, finished work at a decent time in sports marketing. If you've grown your own business, you probably know that you don't always finish on time. But yeah, belief number one, Innofit, is if you feel well, you work well. Belief number two is that most employee wellbeing sessions, services today don't actually drive the change that they could. And we can talk about that in a little bit, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, totally in line with what I'm trying to do as well with Happier at Work. You know, it's about promoting, if you're happier at work, then you're more productive and you have better mental well-being. You're taking what you do in work and, you know, it filters into every aspect of your life. So you may as well be happier at work.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better.
So we are going to talk about well-being at work and wellness at work. So do you want to talk about, I know, Chris, that you put out a poll on LinkedIn a number of weeks ago. Do you want to kind of talk me through that and what kind of results you got?
Yeah, 100%. So in 60 seconds, we'll try that. The reason for the poll comes from basically the idea that obviously Innofit is an employee wellbeing service provider, provide classes, talks, etc. We wanted to tune into like what our actual clients' needs are right now, because obviously a lot has changed. So we thought, what a better way to do that than to actually ask them. So we threw out a question on LinkedIn. We sent a few messages to our newsletter audience and basically found that we had kind of 6 ideas of topics that could be a challenge. And big ones that came out was getting leadership buy-in, boosting engagement, doing the wellbeing basics right, and a few others, but motivation and energy was probably the other big topic. So in a nutshell, those are a few of the key things that came out. I said I'd just chat for 60 seconds, but should I keep going?
Well, it's great. It'd be interesting to kind of look into those in more detail, because I'm sure that they are very common issues that people have, and not just within your network, but generally speaking. So how about if we talk about the leadership buy-in first? So a big struggle would be whether it's HR people or people in management who know that something needs to change, but they're not necessarily getting that buy-in from the senior leaders. Is that the kind of one of the biggest issues?
Really good point. So it's worth probably pointing out what we mean by leadership.
Yeah.
Anyone can be a leader. Like if you are proactive and create something and play a role in that, which otherwise wouldn't have happened, you're a leader. So this idea that actually it needs to be from the top down is 100% true. It also needs to be bottom up, middle down, whatever direction you want to go. So I think leadership buy-in is part of a bigger picture of creating a culture of well-being. It's also more typically the challenge with senior leadership and line managers being able to implement and have the confidence in the wellbeing strategy or the wellbeing sessions that are in place. So I think there's a recent study by PwC that found 90% of people in the UK, about 65% of people globally, CEOs globally are conducting wellbeing initiatives right now, which is obviously amazing, and that shows there is appetite and interest. But the reality is, a lot of the time, as shown by the poll and countless conversations I've had, and I'd imagine you probably had similar, is that you can talk the talk, but don't necessarily always walk the walk. And I think that's the gap right there. There's often a mismatch between what leadership say and what they actually do, and that has to do with role modeling as much as investing. So if you're the type of leader that says you really care about well-being, but actually in practice books calls over someone's favorite time to go to the gym, or has people working at 8 p.m. sending emails, etc. It's about what you role model as much as what you decide to invest in.
Absolutely.
What comes to mind when I talk through that? What are you thinking?
No, totally agree with what you say there. And something that you said about leadership and that whole buy-in piece, it to me, it ties in with that getting the basics right first as well. So, you know, trying to put a plaster, I always say that, you know, trying to put a plaster on something that's clearly a gaping wound is really not the correct way to approach it. And in my own experience, oftentimes wellness initiatives have been very much a tick box exercise. So we should, quote unquote, do a wellness program, or we should have a wellness program, or we'll do like a wellness week or a wellness month or something like that. And the reality I found at the time was people were too stressed and they were too busy often to attend the seminars that were happening, or they all happened in one week, so you could kind of only pick one to go along to and things like that's my own experience of wellness at work and the kind of initiatives that we had in the workplaces where I worked in the past. I would like to understand a bit more about if we talk first about getting the basics right and understanding the underlying issues, I suppose, and then talk about getting, the leadership and how to really get that buy-in.
Yeah, big time. I'll talk about literal example from this afternoon then. Law firm, really positive. People we're talking to really, really get it. And lots of people did attend the sessions, really, really got it. Were there any partners or senior leaders on those calls? Very few. And that's where 15% of the business is comprised partner or senior leader level. So I think that mismatch that we spoke about before is definitely there. And it's not through want of trying. I think it's because there's just more time needed. Your point about previously it being a tick box exercise and now people getting it, I think we're generally in the middle, and in this specific example, probably a little bit before the middle. There's people who are obviously backing the agenda and driving this, who get it, who they're here. But at the other end of the spectrum, i.e. the people that are trying to bring with them is the leadership generally. And it's a struggle because if you are driving it and you're not a senior leader and you don't have those 2 or 3 people on the management committee or whatever it is, like who are the ambassadors and who encourage people to attend, you are trying to push water uphill type of thing. So I think your point about getting the wellbeing basics right is an interesting one, because almost that's where you need to start. Yeah. Whether we're thinking about getting leadership buy-in or we're thinking about helping people feel well and working well and being happy at work.
Yeah.
You need to start with the foundations before you can build. So when we did a series of sessions with them, or whether it's been a company based in Sydney, sessions that have been popular through lockdown were how to move well and eat well and sleep well. And it's how to put yourself first. And it's doing things like that rather than getting carried away with leading a team in a motivating and energizing way, because you need to put your own oxygen mask on first. That's always the analogy we come back to.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great analogy. I love that. Maybe taking a step backwards, first of all, Chris, before kind of jumping into what the solutions are, but what do you see as the benefits of having a wellness program or promoting wellness at work?
Great question. It's obviously something I massively believe in, and as do you, because you don't start a company or a podcast. You don't. So interestingly, my answer really hinges on how I'd frame this for a senior leader. I think at one level you've got statistics, and another you've got stories. So statistics wise, you can look at anecdotally out there in the world is the stuff like 90% of CEOs are investing right now. So there's obviously some belief. It's statistics like from the CIPD around the number of people who don't feel engaged at work. I think over 30% of people through lockdown had said that their physical and mental well-being had actually declined. So it is knowing that statistics are out there that relate to everyone on average, but then it's also statistics that relate to your organization. So for the Employee Wellbeing Forum, which you're very kindly going to be a guest on soon, we spoke in previous sessions about pulse surveys and listening to what staff need and understanding like what their challenges are and struggles are. So I think if you get data and statistics that relate to your own people, you can't argue that. So the statistics side, that's really important to build a business case, but then also the stories. And there's stories again, anecdotally, you can look out there for leaders who've led from the front and shared stories about their wife having depression and child having autism or whatever that might be. And it's how they turn up to work and deal with that, and be human first. And again, stories in your own workforce. Who's having struggles right now? What can they do? And to come full circle to try and answer that question, like about why do I believe in the value of well-being, and maybe why should others, is that if you do go through, look at the statistics, you do go through and find the stories, like logically, emotionally, it's just a no-brainer. And I think people that have done that, it's not a question. I think, but it's for people that ask the question like we do. We're responsible for inspiring and shifting the perspective of people who don't quite get it.
Yeah.
Which is a different question altogether, but something we've obviously put.
That's it. It's finding a way to speak their language if they're not getting it yet. I loved what you said about statistic versus stories. I'm very much a statistics person. My background is in analytics. However, what I will say, my speciality is turning statistics into stories. So you've given me a bit of inspiration there about what I can do in my business about turning, translating the data and the insights that you get into meaningful stories that people can understand and relate to. I loved what you said about human first, because really that's what it is at the end of the day. And I think the key to this is people who are well at work, they are more productive, they're happier, and it has been shown to increase the bottom line. So it's not just a case of, oh, let's all be happy at work. It is a good business decision. And that's, I suppose, fundamentally, that's what it should be about.
Exactly, yeah. And it's not necessarily easy to always prove that specific to a company. But if I take, like, Discovery Channel's our biggest client, and the one that we actually did do a return on investment kind of statistics summary of. And so we had long story short, for a cohort of people in London, we've had conversations with Miami and delivered sessions, etc., in Ireland and globally. But this one cohort, we actually found that in that group, there was an 80% increase in how they rated their health and well-being overall. We found that there was a 32% increase in people feeling energized at work. And we also found a 15% increase in people saying that I feel I consistently work at my best. So you look at those statistics specific to that program. If you're able to consistently turn up and work at your best 15% more often, like you do that every day, that's an absolute game changer. And if you really want to get sophisticated and track the impact on KPIs and end of year performance, etc., that's when it gets interesting. And companies do that, but they're obviously the advanced ones who get it. And because you get it, you measure it, it shows that it works, you invest more in it, and it becomes a kind of self-fulfilling thing. I think it's interesting, companies that do value it and do invest more in it and get it right, they're just going to accelerate. And then the ones that think well-being is nice to have and plug and play will do the job, they're going to get left behind. I think lockdown and the remote working situation has probably accelerated that. But I'd be interested to know what you think about.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. The way a lot of companies have handled the situation kind of shows their true colors. So on the one hand, you have people who are fearful of their jobs. On the other hand, you have people who've lost their jobs because of this crisis. But then the other people who still have jobs, and they can see clearly the way that the management have handled the entire situation. And if they haven't handled it well, it begs the question, like, why am I actually working here? So some of the things that you brought up there, Chris, has sparked some ideas in my head around why would anyone want to work for a company where they don't where they don't promote the wellness of the individuals working there to help them to perform at their best. And it should form part of the attraction the attraction program, or ways to attract talent to an organization, in addition to ways to retain talent. So I'm sure, based on the programs that you're talking about, if people looked at the retention numbers, it's these kind of things don't happen overnight. So you want to kind of look at long-term data here, but I'm sure that you can see correlations between wellness programs and employee retention increasing.
Yeah, big time. And then this is why it's interesting, I suppose, to take a step back, to go back to the old strategy consulting background and economics at uni type thing.
Yeah.
That's interesting because actually, like, your brain, and obviously I can tell you with your analytical background as well, like your brain thinks in a certain way.
Yeah.
So we're thinking about the why does that matter for people listening and clients and businesses who care about this? It matters because you're then able to frame where the value is. So for me in the early days, I thought about it as four kind of pillars of value to get from Wellbeing as a business. One is talent. Two is togetherness. Three is how tuned in everyone is. And then four is like performing well. So the state of play in a lot of companies at the moment is that they're not attracting and retaining the best talent. The team feel disconnected from one another. No one's really fully at work. Absenteeism and presenteeism statistics are crazy high. Presenteeism, by the way, way more impactful than absenteeism. So sickness rates, just because they're the most easy to measure, doesn't mean they're the end of the story. And then fourth, if you've got those foundations in place, like how can you perform to the best of your ability, and how can you get a team to perform incredibly well? And I think the talent one, which you started on, is a really big one. And it's come up recently in a lot of conversations. We're going to actually work with a recruitment company because it comes up in a lot of conversations they're having now. And I think there's statistics as well. So use the analytical part of the brain. Came across a Glassdoor study recently, which said I think 71% of employees would look elsewhere if a company's culture deteriorates. And then going back to an employee benefits survey 2019, I think 52% of people said that they would leave. They would rather choose a company that cared about well-being over one that paid 10% more. And those numbers are just going to increase, I think. So your point on talent is spot on. I think it's a big part of where well-being can add value to a business, or potentially cost a business if they're not doing it.
Yeah.
What
I
do you think?
understand, the younger generations kind of demand this type of stuff. You know, they know what it is that they want. They want to work for companies that value sustainability and wellness, and you know, those kinds of things that previously would have been seen as quite alternative and a little bit out there. But now, you know, they're kind of showing us the way, nearly saying this is how things should be done, and we should be supporting local, and we should be building sustainable communities, and we should be treating people like humans at work, and we should be promoting people's wellness.
Exactly. Yeah, 110%. 110%. I wouldn't really have much to add. I think you just summarized it perfectly. Then I suppose the question is like how and what can you do about it?
Exactly. Yeah. So that kind of brings us back to this whole, getting the basics right. So maybe we talk about what the basics are, and then kind of go on to talk about getting leadership buy-in then, and how do we actually do that?
Mm-hmm. I suppose if I was listening to this now, I would probably want to think about, what does well-being mean to me?
Yeah.
Because well-being can mean very different things to different people. So in Fit, we cover movement, nutrition, mindset, and mental health, but actually financial well-being and spiritual well-being and relationships. And so I suppose getting the basics right really depends on what the basics are for an individual. But once you've got that in place, and we just think with my Fit hat on at the moment, for movement, it's about getting enough steps in the day. Are you active? The statistics around how many of us aren't actually getting enough movement in the day, and that matters because movement's linked to our mental well-being. I know a lot of people that if they're exercising will be more likely to eat well.
Yeah.
So moving on to nutrition, getting the basics there right. What does that look like? It means maybe having the fridge filled with veg and fruit or whatever. I don't actually know what you're supposed to put in the fridge anymore. I saw some program on ITV that said you shouldn't put things in the fridge that I thought you had to, but
Oh no.
that's besides the point. So nutrition, it's about just managing blood sugar levels, so that blood sugar roller coaster, and making sure that we're having a solid breakfast, all the boring stuff that people have heard a million times, like it matters. And then
it
lastly,
matters, but also I think it kind of went out the window with lockdown, I think. So I know certainly me, and I'm sure other people can relate to this as well. You know, it was all the stodgy stuff and the kind of stocking up. What do I need to buy? What do I need to bring into the house to, you know, it's the kind of comfort food I was bringing in, which I wouldn't normally have in the house. And then, of course, the baking. And we all know, I mean, I've seen so many, you know, given my background in FMCG, I've seen so many analyses that have shown the spike in things like flour, and anecdotally, like there's no flour left on the shelves and things like that. So there's a huge, you know, and the pictures on Instagram and Facebook of baking that people were doing. So, yeah, I mean, I was doing that as well. So those kinds of things, and if you're eating that kind of food, then that's going to mess with that. I think people, I mean, for me, I saw a lot of people out during lockdown. Maybe that's just because they were all going at the same time in the same place. But people were taking their daily walks, they were going out for cycles and things like that as well. So I think that the kind of nutrition and food element was probably a little bit trickier.
Yeah, definitely. And alcohol in there as well. I think there's, I suppose like 50% up. So, and that matters because it impacts your mindset to come to movement, nutrition, mindset.
Absolutely.
Like, it's all so linked, but in terms of specific mindset stuff, it was about creating boundaries at the end of the day, like closing your laptop and saying, right, shut down complete type thing.
Yeah.
It's about having that 10 minutes reflection or mindfulness at the end of the day, asking yourself, okay, what happened today? So what does that mean for me? Now, what will I do about it? Like, it's all sorts of ideas come up, and I'd imagine everyone's got their own version of that. But the basics, I suppose, is at the most fundamental level, are you making space for your own health and well-being? And like, I'd be the first to like, so with your baking and food stuff, I had a couple of weeks where I probably drank a bit too much and wasn't eating brilliantly. But I suppose it's about making the choice then to nip it in the bud and try and create habits rather than let it slide. And that's relevant for the last 3 months, 6 months. It's relevant in life, right? So I think that was interesting in terms of, that's what I think when I think about the basics.
Yeah.
But I'm interested. Yeah, what came to mind when I was asking what basics are for you?
I'll talk about that in a minute, but really, what one of the things I want to kind of pick up on there and explore in a little bit more detail, something that I say that I would like to do, but maybe don't do enough of it. Of course, tell everyone else to do it because I think it's a huge benefit, is this idea of reflecting at the end of the day. So maybe spending 10 minutes and saying what went well, what do I need to improve, what am I going to do differently tomorrow? And even if I say it in my head, I know what went well, but it's the same things maybe that keep happening again and again. But I find if you write that down, if you actually use it as a reflection and journaling opportunity, there you go, he's got his journal. And really think about what you're going to do differently the next day. That ties in with what you're saying with nipping it in the bud, with this idea of you notice that you're sliding a bit. Okay, so you reflect at the end of the day, what am I going to do differently tomorrow? And you get back on the wagon, so to speak. The wellness basics, like before we started recording, we were talking more kind of about the physical environment and things like that. So that's one thing maybe that we haven't covered in relation to the basics. For me, the basics of well-being, I suppose, if I thought about getting the basics right, is understanding what the specific issues are within an organization. So if someone is offering things like, if it's yoga, or if, like, I'm trying to think back to the kinds of things that we would have had dental hygienists come in, we would have had yoga, we would have had mindful eating and things like that. So it was all very nice. But maybe the work culture itself wasn't really, I was about to say it wasn't really toxic, but it's the opposite of that. It wasn't really conducive to that kind of thing. So for me, I think they needed to look at the culture in the first instance and have a look at, well, what's going on here with the culture? And it was kind of like a culture of fear. And I've been listening to a few other podcasts recently and stuff like that comes up, and trust and fear and that sort of stuff. I think you need to have those things grounded and in place, and having the right people in the right teams, in the right roles, with the right managers before you even think about doing anything else. For me, that's kind of taking a step back and having a look at, and interestingly, that reminds me of the research that I did for my master's, and it's all about having people's needs satisfied. So are your needs being satisfied at work? And if they're not, then you need to rectify that and make sure people's needs are being satisfied.
Which implies you need to understand what people's needs are, which is interesting. I'm interested to actually read or hear about your other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And everyone has these 3 basic universal needs, which is autonomy, relatedness, and competence. People also have unique needs, but I suppose it's equipping managers to be able to have those conversations and equipping people to understand what their own needs are in a way that's kind of not very formal, that they can really understand themselves. Because I know if someone said to me, what are your needs? I'd be like, well, I don't know. But it's understanding, like, basically what pisses you off at work and what makes you feel really good. So for me, it's a process of really understanding and reflecting on yourself. So I like recognition. I like to be recognized for things that I've done well, that have contributed to. That's like fundamental to my needs being satisfied. And if I suppose if you see other people being recognized for things that you feel you're doing equally well, then that's my needs are not being satisfied in that scenario.
So I think, yeah, because autonomy, relatedness, recognition. Like I remember when we spoke before, and like the relatedness in my mind was what we've been looking at as human connection.
Yeah.
The recognition you can definitely link to well-being. In the conversation with Miami today, it was about like kind of saying thank you and saying that, guys, you're still included. And I found that really interesting because it is so much overlap. And I think well-being, autonomy is probably more about feeling like you're the master of your own destiny and have
even like you have a choice, and you're not being micromanaged, you're not being told what to do, but you're being given sufficient guidance as to what is expected of you, but then you're let kind of to go and decide for yourself how you're going to execute or how you're going to actually carry out your role.
Because that's interesting, and about setting a plan as well, because we talked before about creating a culture, and I've made a note about reflection as well. But if we think about this idea of how do you actually create a culture, I've come across like an 8-step model whereby you establish a sense of urgency at the beginning. Like, why does this matter? It matters because people need to feel well in order to work well. It matters because it's the right thing to do. So if you establish a sense of urgency among the people who can help shape the solution, then that's a big first step. And then there's a lot of steps in between about creating a guiding coalition and a group in between who can like develop the change plan. But it's about creating it together. Someone has to lead it. And then ultimately ending up at point 8, which is incorporating the changes into the culture. So it becomes the company, it becomes the business, it's in your blood, rather than feeling like something on the side, which is someone trying to push the agenda where no one else is listening.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if I hear what you're saying, it's really about culture it's really hard to articulate. It's really hard to define. But to me, it's all to do with people's values. And if the values ultimately come from the founder of the organization, and they may change and evolve over time as new people join the organization, but then it's about holding people accountable to that is what we do around here, and recognize them for it, or give them some sort of recognize them in the way that they feel valued. Different people will have different needs around that, but then going back to your nipping in the bud, when people do stuff that's not aligned with the values, and really calling that out and saying that's not okay to do that here, but having the strength, I suppose, to be able to do that.
Yeah, big time. I think because when you say, there's a few points that come off of things I say, I have the same thing when you say stuff. But I think sticking along the culture side, because there's obviously a lot more to talk about. I listened to a really interesting comment by, I think, the founder of, I want to say, Social Chain, who at the beginning of creating the business really set a clear culture in place and was very clear on what he wanted that to be. And it was stuff like, if someone stole someone's pen, and then they complained about it, like, don't write a post-it and complain about it. That's not what our culture is about, because that person probably taken that pen to go away and do some work for the business, which we're all a part of. So I think, for me, the culture is very much like you said, about the values, the ideas, and the behaviors that ultimately happen as a result of the environment that you're in. So if that's if it's a culture where well-being is valued, incredible. If it's not, that's not so incredible. I'm conscious as well, we didn't come back on your point about physical environment, but maybe we're trying to cram a lot in, so we still need to talk about reflection as well.
The physical environment, really, I suppose, I mean, a huge challenge at the start of lockdown, where people were working from home. They were working from, the stories I've heard of people working from their bedrooms, people working in shared accommodation and things like that as well, finding it quite difficult to manage that, trying to carve out a place where you can actually do work. And my own experience, and I shared this before we started recording, Chris, is I'm in a flat. It's not big. I don't have a separate office, so you can see kind of in the background what's going on here. It's not a big office, or sorry, I don't have an office, but what I think I would really like is a separate space to really call my office and to have all of my things around. But I don't have that. And there's a lot of people who, while they're working from home, they don't have easy access to everything. Now, for me, I'm going through the process of digitizing everything. So everything's accessible on my laptop, and that's fine. But for other people, they just need to have easy access to stuff, I suppose.
Yeah. It reminded me of a story, actually. This is going right back to April, and how one person had their laptop and phone on the table in their kind of living room, their new living room. They were living back with parents again, so they didn't have it anymore. And every time they looked at the phone or they looked at the computer, their habit was to check their emails and then reply to a couple of emails, because half their team was in the US, and that was a useful thing to do. But where you are consistently checking your work, you don't really get a break. So I think the physical environment, moving that phone and laptop into a different room, putting it in a bag, shutting it down.
What you were talking, what you were talking about, boundaries earlier. Yeah, it's not having it in a place where it's visible after you've switched off from work, and that I'm terribly guilty from that. And you'll know yourself what you were saying about, like, you know, when do you actually finish work when you run your own business? And yeah, like it's hard to know when to actually switch off, because there's always stuff to be done. And I saw this, or heard something the other day, which was super interesting. And it was, I tell you, it was, now what's his name? Is it Daniel Berkman, who writes for The Guardian? I'll put a link to the article in the show notes, because I liked it so much. And he wrote things in a way that I've never read them before, and explained them in such a way that it's different to how it wasn't, the concepts that he shared weren't new, but the way he explained it was completely new to me, at least. And he said something about, you'll always be busy. There'll always be more to do. And it's about choosing what not to do. And I have heard that before, but however he explained it, I just thought, he explained it in such a way that, like, and it's so true. There always will be something to do. There'll always be something to occupy your time, and you need to actively choose what not to do.
That's really cool, actually. I'll track that down. There's sparked two thoughts I just share as well. One is that someone once told me anyone can be busy, and that stuck with me. Anyone can be busy. You can be busy on the wrong stuff, though, which is as a team, like recently, last week, we actually wrote for the first time a not to do list.
Yeah.
We're busy, like we're being really, really busy. But it's a question of, are we being effective? So for the first time as a group, we each wrote our not to do this week list, and it was really productive, and we're going to do it again, definitely.
Yeah, that's a super idea. That is such, and I have heard it before, but I've not implemented it yet. And I think I will. I think I'll do that today, write on my what's on my not to do. So make sure that you don't get distracted by doing this and this, which you really don't need to do.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take your recommendations. Check out this Guardian character as well. So thanks.
Yeah. Well, it was his last article for The Guardian ever. So I guess he writes on Saturday for The Guardian. I hope I've got the name right, but I'll put the link in the show notes. I'll send you a link separately as well anyway, Chris.
I'll put this in my like personal interest reading bucket, because it's not on my to-do list.
So something that we haven't really touched on, we spoke about at the start, we were kind of veered in a nice, lovely roundabout way back to leadership buy-in and how to get leadership buy-in. So it's about getting the basics right first, and getting that leadership buy-in. Or maybe, you know, is that chicken and egg? Do we need leadership buy-in first before we can get the basics right?
That's a good observation, actually. It's probably is a little bit chicken and egg, isn't it? You're not going to get leadership buy-in unless you've got the basics right and they can see that it works. But then you're not going to get the basics right if leadership don't really want to be a part of it. So I think I will hedge my bets on that one and say, yeah, you need both, but you also need somewhere to start, don't you?
Yeah.
This idea, like I always have a tendency of coming back to an analogy of, there's an individual, like, what would you do if you wanted to be healthy and well? And I think if you're an individual looking to form a new habit, are you relating this to creating a new culture, then you would start small. Like, what's the smallest thing that I can do right now? Yeah. And then what's half of that? And then, okay, I'll try and do that for the next couple of days. And then once I've done that and maybe failed once, I'll forgive myself if I did go to a good effort, but I'll be honest with myself and also just get back on the wagon. So the same way, if I wanted to create a habit of eating a piece of fruit each day, and I was currently only eating like 2 sporadically Monday to Friday, I might start really, really small and say, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm going to set an alarm to trigger that behavior, and I'm going to buy fruit and put it in the fridge at the start of the week, even though I said I'm not sure if it needs to be in the fridge. And then once you then get that 3 days in a row, you've got something to build off. And I suppose it's the same thing if I relate that to the conversation we had earlier. A different one, you know, actually a tech company. They've not really got massive leadership buy-in with this, but there's a kind of sentiment that it could be useful and it does fit within the culture. And so what they asked for was actually just an example of what this could look like. Because if we did it to start with, make sure it's really easy to implement. And then if you gather answers to questions along the way, the benefit of doing everything virtually now is it's so easy to gather quick feedback. Then you know what impact it's had. So I think, yeah, your chicken and egg thing is definitely on the money, but you have to start somewhere. Yeah. And I think if you start small, you're giving yourself a good shot at cementing that as either a habit, if you're thinking about individual and fruit or whatever that is, and as a company, similar kind of thing. So if you've never done Wellbeing before, what would 1 session look like? What would 3 sessions look like?
Yeah.
If we're doing Wellbeing really well at the moment, how can you make it even better? You know?
How do you take it to the next level? Yeah. No, I loved what you said about the habits and starting small. I can totally relate to that as someone who previously would have just taken these giant leaps, and then that's fine for a few months even, and then just like fall off the wagon or whatever. And I've read so many books on habits as well, and it is so interesting, this whole idea of starting small. But the other thing that struck me about what you said is about taking personal responsibility. So it's up to each individual to take responsibility for themselves and to own their own wellness and to manage their own time, or to manage their own boundaries around saying no to work, or managing their clients, or managing their boss, all of those kinds of things. It's really up to each individual to, you know, to implement those kinds of things themselves. So while the company can present all of these different options, it's up to each individual to take on the suggestions or whatever.
Literally, exactly. Like if you're going to do something long term, you have to want to do it, short of forcing people to comply. Like if you want someone to do something, they have to want to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I say present the choice, and take responsibility for yourself in that choice, whether that's because you want to role model and you think that as a leader that's a good thing for you to do, or whether you don't actually have a team, you just want to take responsibility for your own health and well-being. I think that this idea, to close on, like ultimate responsibility, 100% for your own life, for your own happiness, for your own work life, is a pretty powerful one to conclude on. Because I think if I taken myself as an example, like there's loads of stuff that I've not taken full responsibility for, and you complain and you think, oh, this shouldn't have happened this way, or someone else didn't do what they said they were going to do. Like that's my fault. Like if someone didn't do what they said and I'm annoyed about it, like I'm in charge of how I feel about that, and maybe there's something I could have done to change it. So I don't know if we're going to end on a more powerful note than taking ultimate responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris, the question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, what makes you happier at work?
Yeah, okay, maybe there is something bigger to end on. What makes me happy at work is really people. I think whether it's relatedness or human connection, whatever phrase you want to use, it's very cliche, but if I think about the times where Inner Fit was really difficult, and I was not having a good time mental health wise, or was just not motivated, it's when you feel really on your own and isolated, and things are not going like you wanted them to. If I think about now what it's like to have a team and have a laugh on a Monday call and close up with a Friday call, ultimately, and things like this, it's cool to have a conversation, which is work, and it's just people fundamentally. So how about you?
I can totally relate. I can totally relate to that, Chris. And that's, to me, that's what the future holds. It is something that I do miss, is working with a team, working with people, and it's conversations like this. And I have conversations with other entrepreneurs and stuff quite regularly. That's what makes the difference, I think. that is, you know, it is that connection with other people, and finding shared interests and having an impact, I suppose, and trying to change and influence what's going on at work, especially.
Yeah. If I was going to add a second part of that, it would be meaning, I guess, like fulfillment.
No, go for it.
As people always like conversations, and that's a big part of happiness in life. I think I did, when setting up Innofit, I did get quite geeky on it and actually research, like, the longest ever longitudinal study into happiness showed that human relationships was the common thread. But also a lot more recently, there's so much research pointing towards meaning and fulfillment, and like believing that what you do has an impact. So I hope that our conversation today has sparked a few ideas, and at least someone out there is taking one positive action away with them, because that's kind of what it's about.
That's it. Yeah. And like what I was going to say, that I always share the podcast across social media. If people want to get involved in the conversation, they can absolutely comment on the post, or they can reach out to myself or yourself directly. I will share my socials at the end. But Chris, if people want to reach out, if they want to tag you, what's the best way to reach you? You can talk about your events, you can talk about your social media channels, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Aoife. So we've got, I'm Chris Pinner. If you want to track me down on LinkedIn, it's probably the best place. Not a massive user of social media, though we are on it with Innofit UK, and chris@innofit.co.uk is the email address. You can find the website, which is innofit.co.uk. So I suppose why would you want to do that? You might just want to have a chat about wellbeing and your team and your organisation. And in terms of events, we hold a regular now monthly employee wellbeing forum, which is a bit of a gathering of people who like conversations like this. I suppose we had over 100 registrants at the last one, and I'm very excited to say that you'll be a panelist on a future one. So
I will, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Now, the last one I went to was brilliant. I took a lot from it. It was a really, really interesting conversation. So definitely worth checking out.
Oh, thanks a bunch. Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks so much, Chris.